I can honestly say is the tip of the iceberg. It's Titanic worth. You may see this odd one or two come out, but believe it or not, there'll be hundreds of cases like this.
Most women know their abuser. Stacey, not her real name, was married to hers for nearly 20 years. To the outside world, her ex was a respected police officer.
At the beginning, he kind of love-bombed you.
Oh God, yeah.
When did the relationship change?
So the love bombing started, and it was jewellery, I'm taking you on holiday, and expensive gifts. And then I found out I was pregnant really early on. And from that point on, really, I wasn't allowed to see my parents as much. My phone was monitored. You close the door and yeah, the monster just literally, you just see this veil come over him, and it was just awful.
What form did the abuse take? Was he violent, controlling?
So, controlling, sexual assaults happened. He raped me.
In 2021, we reported more than 100 women had come forward to the Centre for Women's Justice, claiming their police officer partners had domestically abused them. Their testimony formed part of a super complaint back in 2020, which alleged a culture of violent men within the force. A year later, Sarah Everard was murdered by a serving police officer, prompting widespread protests. Since, hundreds more claims of predatory officers have come to light, among them David Carrick, one of Britain's most prolific rapists. Today, as Greater Manchester Police said that 98 of their officers are being investigated over alleged sexual offences, the National Police Chiefs Council promised to do more to root out abusive officers.
There are some people who say that, you know, Metropolitan Police Officer David Carrick, a serial rapist, he's just one of a few bad apples. Do you buy that argument?
No. It's not a bad apple, it's a bad tree. And the tree is just rotten to the core.
You reported him?
I did report him, and we literally fled after he threatened to slit my throat and watch me choke on my own blood. I didn't know what to do, so spoke to my friend, and then we literally got out of there. I wouldn't sleep there another night.
Not long after leaving, Stacey reported her ex for repeatedly raping her, being violent towards her and their children. Her ex has previously denied all the allegations, but in 2019, Stacey was told the case against her former partner had been closed due to insufficient evidence.
He used to say, no one's ever going to believe you, you'll be taken away, our sons will stay with me, and you'll just be kicked to the wind because no one's ever going to believe you, they're not going to trust you, and if we do go out, you keep your mouth shut.
Stacey has asked the police to re-look at her case. Since this interview, she has been contacted by the force in question, who say they will now look into what action, if any, can be taken, while her ex has retired from policing. Stacey says it feels like there is no end for her.
What impact has all of this had on you, on your mental health?
I've now been diagnosed with complex PTSD and PTSD, and I have night terrors, I have flashbacks, and I can feel the pain, what happened, and that doesn't go away.
Minnie Stevenson reporting. Well, we did ask the National Police Chiefs Council to come on the programme tonight, but no one was made available. I'm joined now by Noga Offer, solicitor at the Centre for Women's Justice, and Shabnam Chowdhury, a former detective superintendent for the Metropolitan Police. She says her career there was a 30-year struggle with racism. Thanks, both of you, very much for joining us. Your organisation today said that the police and the public are finally waking up to this massive scandal. How hard is that to hear for the women who for years have been trying to raise the alarm?
I think it must be really, really hard, but a lot of the women who contacted us said that this was the first time they'd heard anybody talking about the issue openly, and they'd been really, really isolated. Even other domestic abuse survivors didn't really understand what they had been through. So they've been, felt really, really silenced.
We've seen horrific cases, of course, Wayne Couzens and now David Carrick. And today, Manchester Police admitting 98 of their officers are being investigated for allegations into domestic abuse. More cases are coming to light, more women are coming forward. But are you any more confident that the police will deal with it properly?
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Obviously, it's really positive that this is now an issue that's on the map and it's being talked about openly. But how far recommendations will actually feed down to what happens on the ground is very difficult to know.
I mean, Shabnam Chowdhury, National Police Chiefs Council, have told us today they are making progress, forces auditing past cases. Are you confident as a former officer?
I think, as Noga says, I think you have to see what happens. But the fact is, the abuse of women by police officers has been a closed shop for decades. So it's going to be very difficult for people to trust that, and that they've got the confidence that this will happen. The Metropolitan Police, and I speak from my experience, Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has said that he's looking at 2 to 3 arrests every week for the next few months. That isn't going to be just evidence that's come forward just recently. That's going to be historic offences. There will be investigations that have sat on desks of senior leaders who have perhaps tried to brush it under the carpet. So Mark Rowley's come in and he now wants to clean up the house.
I mean, so much is about process, but it's culture, isn't it, as much as anything else?
Look, you can introduce as many systems and processes as you want. The thing is that you have to change is the toxic culture of an organisation, and not just of the Metropolitan Police, but across policing across the UK. It's going to be very difficult for Sir Mark Rowley, for policing, to now change the mindset of leaders that have a culture that has been toxic for decades. You've got to also then work from the ground level up all the way to the very top to ensure that that culture changes. That is going to be the really difficult part. Systems and processes can be changed, can be adhered to, but the mindset and the behaviours of people will not change overnight.
And that mindset is really key, isn't it? It's that ability for police officers. You're asking them to turn on their colleagues, to report on their colleagues. And the nature of the police is this idea, you work for a team, you're playing on the same team. How difficult is it to change that culture?
Well, I mean, one of the problems is that the systems that are being introduced don't go that far. So, for example, we asked for all these cases to be dealt with by an external force. At least then people won't know each other, they won't be able to look on databases and that sort of thing. But that hasn't been introduced, only kind of in a few exceptional cases, and even there we haven't been told how many. So in order to be able to address cultural issues, which obviously need a huge culture change, you also need systems that are actually going to be robust. Even since last summer, we've already had to threaten to take the IOPC to court because they haven't...
They are supposed to be an external investigator.
They've refused to comply with one of the promises they themselves made in a super complaint last summer. So, even the systems themselves, we haven't actually seen working.
So what happens now?
Well, now we've got to look at what happens in terms of the Metropolitan Police. Maggie Blythe is the National Police Chief Counsel. She is a Deputy Chief Constable. She's been appointed as the Violence Against Women and Girls lead. The Met Police have this hotline, which I believe is working very well at this stage. They got 40 to 50 calls a week. A third of those are from policing across the UK. It's not what the reports that they do, it's what they now do with those. They are determined to root out these bad apples, and it's only in the next few months for sure that we will have any sort of real...
And I mean, the Centre for Women's Justice today said that Wayne Couzens and David Carrick's case demonstrated the sense of impunity and escalation of violence if the smaller things are allowed to keep going, turning a blind eye to what's regarded as banter. And you know yourself from your time in the force that the banter it can be the start.
Absolutely. And as a former whistleblower, I can tell you the experiences that you have in terms of when you do try to speak out, when you do challenge inappropriate behaviours, corrupt officers. What happens is you get ranks closed around you and you are isolated, you're victimised, you're subjected to investigation yourself. These are the things that the organisation has to now root out. When you've got women being abused by police officers, male or female, you've got to find a way to create safe spaces for those whistleblowers so that they can speak out and that these dirty top cops can actually be sacked from the organisation.
And Noga Offer, I mean, this is about restoring women's trust in the police. How close are we to that?
Well, I think it's a case of, you know, have to eat the pudding to see what happens. But I do think there are going to be a lot of women coming forward now, hearing that cases are going to be taken seriously, and the forces need to be ready to deal with that and to give them that sense of trust and confidence.
And would you encourage, given everything we've seen, not least in the last couple of years, would you encourage women to always come forward?
Absolutely. If women don't come forward, then we can't push the systems to change, and we can't challenge culture change and, and system change. So it's really, really important for them to do that.
Thanks very much to both of you. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you for coming in, Fatima.